Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here at my first ever Small World Doc Party, the first doc party for some of you as well. Happier too that we have officially survived Term 1. I've really seen the value that documentation has in a learning and teaching setting over the past few months. It's been a challenging learning curve for me, but oh so rewarding, and I've seen an enhancement of each child's learning and discovery through documentation, but most importantly, seen that the kind of documentation that we do here provides information so rich, information that cannot be demonstrated by formal, standardized tests and checklists. I'm really excited to share some of that documentation tonight. Introducing our Sun class. What an exciting first few months it has been. We have all been settling in, me included, and this first term has been a time of getting to know one another in this small world environment. For some of us, a completely new environment, and for others, something familiar, yet a whole new side of the school. It's been a really awesome journey getting to know each of these special, unique beings who all have something different to add to each day. I asked the children what a rumpus is. Some ideas included bouncing, dancing, singing, swinging in the trees, and yes, we have bounced, danced, sung, and swung our way into this year. Full steam ahead. It's been amazing to see these 3 and 4-year-olds get back into the swing of school so quickly. The first few weeks saw the children getting a feel for the environment, a new classroom, a new playground. Each child spent time in these crucial few weeks getting to know their classmates, their teachers, and the different materials available to them. For many, this transition into a new space with new friends was an easy one, while others held on a little longer to things familiar, before allowing themselves to fly. Since it is the first year that the Sun class is on the preschool side of the school, it is also the first year of weekly Monday visits to the park. These forest school days have become a firm favourite for our Sun class, and the park space continuously offers us new places to explore, treasures to find, and new people and animals to meet along the way. The park has also encouraged the testing of boundaries, and I don't mean this in the way of misbehaving, but rather that having access to an unexplored space has allowed the children to test what they're comfortable with, and just how far they're willing to push themselves. We, as teachers, guide and watch in the park, but the children are ultimately allowed the freedom to explore. Control seems so effective and satisfying, but too much of it has the potential to break the self-will and self-determination each child possesses. What I saw from our Sun class in the first few weeks at school was indeed a testing of these boundaries, both personal boundaries as well as the boundaries set by others. In her article entitled On the Wildness of Children, Carol Black says, "To know the world, you have to live in the world." These children have been living in it, and so have been discovering more of who they are, what they love, and what makes them tick. Imaginations have been running wild. Within days of being at Small World, I observed imaginative play dominated by superheroes, princesses, and animal games. In this picture, Caleb, Boutle, and Griffin were playing a game where each of them was a different kind of wildcat. "We are scary friends," said Boutle. The environment has allowed each child's wild and self-willed mind to turn its attention outward, creating its own connections, making its own discoveries, and igniting its own will. I thought that this was all really fitting for our Sun class. They were beginning to encounter their own unique wildness, their self-will, and the curiosity within each of them. With this in mind, we began exploring the book Where the Wild Things Are during story times. One day I asked the children, "What is a wild thing?" "A monster," Hannah replied. "And what is a monster?" To which Caleb said, a creature we create in our minds." It was from this point that I really saw the start of an inquiry into wildness, an inquiry into the child's imagination within them. We then had a philosophical inquiry with Where the Wild Things Are. The children were invited to listen to the story again and then pose any questions or ideas they had. The children agreed that Max, from the story, had created the wild things in his imagination, but Charlotte wanted to know why. Some ideas were that Max was lonely or sad that he got sent to bed without supper, which led him to create monsters. This led the children to begin thinking about their own imaginations and what sometimes inspires them to imagine the things they do. I think imagination is so often stifled in schools, with children expected to act and think in certain ways. Here was an opportunity to champion each child's imagination, placing that child central to their own learning. I was beginning to see that much of the imaginative play I had been observing was perhaps the child's way of expressing how they were feeling or how their mind was working. We took the ideas from our discussion into the atelier, where the children drew some of the things they imagined when feeling certain emotions, like feeling scared, lonely, or sad. These are a few of the pieces that emerged. I think this is really telling. I think that the life of a child is complicated. Coming into a new environment with so much to encounter, while still trying to figure out who you are, is overwhelming. Many members of our Sun class find it difficult to describe the workings of their minds, and so let their imaginations run free. And that's quite beautiful to see. In allowing this, the child can find a connection between their free self-will, their wildness, and the order of the world. So what does wild mean? The children initially had quite negative ideas about wildness. If something is wild, it might eat you all up, said Aidan. Wild is dangerous, said Dierwold. We then read a book called Mr. Tiger Goes Wild, in which Mr. Tiger is bored of being proper in the city and wants to go a little wild. He does so by walking on 4 legs, having fun without hurting anyone, and starts to feel more like himself. Our Sun class's perceived ideas on wildness began to change. Wild is not so wild, said Hannah. You can be wild and not hurt people. Wild is not so bad, said Boutle. And Kieran exclaimed, being wild is being ourself. Yes, indeed, that is just it. Wild is a self-willed, self-determined child that lives out of its own intrinsic nature. Wildness does not mean boundaryless, careless, or playing with reckless abandon. It means the self-seeking and self-discovery of a child in an environment that does not push notions of how one should exist. The Sun class expressed interest in turning our classroom into the forest from where the wild things are. And this really emphasized to me the limitations and constraints the 4 walls of a classroom can provide. The children had a desire for more, and luckily saw an incredible potential for our classroom. Their imaginations could take them to places that existed beyond the corners of this mere room. And so the walls really became the world all around. It's a jungle in here, said Yuta. Our classroom transformation even sparked interest in the other preschool classes, with Wolfie proclaiming that the passageway from our class to Sue and Nancy's class was the river leading from the forest to the desert. This classroom transformation then led to the start of our Wild Place project in the atelier. Tess spoke about this at the doc party evening. What I've noticed in the more recent weeks is a change in play. Imaginations continue to run freely, but play has become more systematic, procedural, and with a deepened sense of sensitivity. The children have taken on homemaking and games that involve families and everyday activities such as cooking, cleaning, eating, and sleeping. Here, Caleb and Erin headed up a game that lasted ages. It involved the collection of ingredients, the cooking of food, and finally, the sharing of a meal together as friends. With this type of play also came the search for safe spaces, special nooks where the children could create homes within our school environment. We ran this idea into the atelier where the Sun class constructed homes out of a variety of materials. This work involved learning to cut tricky materials like wire, the art of 3D construction, as well as how to use glue effectively. Here you can see that Layla had absolutely no problem with this task. She got really stuck in. The idea of safe spaces shone through, with many of the children saying that their home needed to be strong in order to keep them safe. One morning in our classroom, Griffin, Joe, and Dierwold busied themselves with the provocation that had been set up. They began to build different animal homes. In this picture, you can see that Griffin built individual homes for each animal. Each had its own space. This was interesting. Later, I posed the question, can different creatures live together in the same home? At first, most of the children said no. I phrased the question a little differently. What about the people you live with? Are you all the same? No, they said. Griffin said, me and my mom both have yellow skin and yellow hair, but she is a girl and we are different. Yes, same, but different. Just like all of us here at Small World, we're all unique, yet we share the space together. What about us is the same? We all have bones, said Maddie, and eyes to see, said Layla. And a heart, said Aidan. Ben said that our hearts may look different, but we can all love. And love here we do. The children have begun to challenge the idea that certain animals, humans, or creatures belong in certain homes. and these children see that it is indeed difference that unites us. Given the latest development to our inquiry, I find it really interesting to look back on this story, which occurred in our first few weeks. Ben had placed beads from the atelier into this nest, and he said, "I put eggs in here, but I don't know what's going to hatch out of them." Belonging. What really belongs in a nest? Only a specific type of bird? Only a bird, full stop? These children's eyes, minds, and hearts are open to encountering the other that belongs just as much as the self. And to end with this quote, "In wildness is the preservation of the world. We need the self-will, the imaginations, the eyes, and the love of children to see and know this world, the small world right here, and the greater world around us."